Welcome to Playful Beginnings, a podcast about the magic of play therapy for therapists, students, and anyone interested. In our podcast, we'll explore the deeper understanding of play therapy and the skills we use when working with children.
We hope to help you understand the why behind what we do and how it helps kids heal and grow. I'm Dr. Christy Opiola, a working play therapist and university professor in North Carolina.
I'm Dr. Maggie Parker, a play therapist and professor in DC. Well, hi, Christy.
Morning, Maggie. How are you this morning?
Oh, peachy keen. How are you? I thought it might be so interesting. We maybe talking about how we've seen or worked with kids who've had trauma in this space, and our experiences when working with children who've had trauma.
Yeah, no. Gosh. I mean, I think the first thing we need to say is each child's going to present uniquely. So there's
Yeah.
not like a uniform way that kids present who have trauma or even particular types of trauma. And I don't think there's I can't be predictive in the time frame of like how much therapy or like how long therapy will take for
No.
even if it's like similar in experience. Um, uh, the first one that popped up in my mind is more of like the relational component of like really feeling safe with me in the space. I find that that takes the longest to develop in particular. And I think I've shared this in the past, but I work a lot with kids who have some type of relational trauma.
So can you
Uh,
explain like what you mean by relational trauma?
yeah, so that could be so a large portion of the population that I work with have like either been in the system through foster care, adoption,
Child
but
protective
I've also
services.
child protective services. But I've worked with parents in recovery, right? Where there was a power imbalance between parent and child, and the parents drinking became really unpredictable. They went away to rehab. So there's like a big break in the relationship, often after like a really intense, stressful moment within the system. Right. And so sometimes I include that in relational trauma
The
because
family system. Yeah.
the family system, right? But even with the parent-child,
Right.
sometimes the child is the one who finds the parent passed out in the shower and clogging the drain so the water is right? Like just scary experiences for kids to experience with an unresponsive parent because
Hurting. And
they're hurting and they're coping with alcohol, so they're unresponsive because maybe their alcohol level or their drug level is so high in the system they're not able to respond, whatever that looks like, right? And so for me, the building the relationship takes the longest because what they have experienced is relationships are unpredictable. So there's a lack of safety in relationships. So what makes me different? Right. And that's what they have to kind of figure out in our relationship, that I'm hopefully going to be predictable and show up week after week, right? And show up in similar ways each week. And I'm not going to be reactive, even if they do things in the environment to try to test limits or test me or whatever it is, that I'm going to be pretty predictable. And for children who have more significant lack of safety in relationships, right, that takes a lot longer. And so for me, that's the experience that pops up first. So, like, as we're getting to relate, as maybe they're finding more safety in me, they also feel reactive to that. So, like having this really great moment of connection and other stuff, and then the child lashing out and scratching you or spitting in your face or, throwing sand at you or something to be like, ooh, this doesn't feel good.
mhm.
Right? It's really what their behavior is telling me, like, I want this and I don't feel
Right.
safe, right? So it's kind of this push pull, 2 steps forward, 6 steps backwards kind of relationship building that happens over time with kids. And, on this podcast, I've shared, like kids who may verbally share that with you, like almost assaultively or feels assaultively, right? Like just on who you are as a human, or it could be more specific, like,
Mhm.
we're having this great moment. I'm not used to having great moments with people, so let me lash out because it's easier if I ruin the relationship than
With you.
reiterate my like internal belief about myself, that condition of worth, that I'm just not a lovable person,
Right.
but you're showing love. And so it's easier if I break the love because then I know why, than if you break the love and I don't understand why you don't love me like other people haven't liked or loved me in the past, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
kind of those are the moments that pop up for me because I think they take the longest to develop, and you get a lot of repeated messages that I want relationship, and relationship feels so scary.
Yeah. It makes me think I don't think I've shared this story before, but I used to work at a juvenile detention center. And so it was teenagers, right? So I wasn't doing play therapy, but I was still child-centered and meeting their developmental needs. And a lot of times they needed more play-based kind of experiences because of the development being impacted. And there I worked on the girls unit, and most everybody had trauma. And there was one child who got really triggered and was being told things by the people around her, the guards and everybody, that she was unworthy in some way. And so she was screaming and sharing her frustration and hurt and sadness. And so then everyone else was screaming back at her. And so then they ended up putting her behind the door, which means that she was locked in her cell, which, is all concrete with a concrete bed and a mat. And she kept screaming. And I guess it like got to the point where it was driving like guards crazy. And so they like called me in like, Doc, what do you fix this? And so I go to the unit, and they wouldn't let me open the door. A lot of times I would just open the door and go in the cell with them, which also demonstrates that I trust them, and I believe in them, and I feel safe. And they wouldn't let me in. And so there was just a little tiny window on the door, and I just put my hand up, and she put her hand up on the other side of the glass. And I just sat there with her, and I was like, you're really hurt. That really was painful. And I just like was present with her in relationship, and she stopped screaming, and we like breathed together. I didn't say like let's breathe. I just was like, and we just calmed down, and everyone's like, what did you do? How'd you do that? And I was like, I just cared. Like it was a relation, like she needed to feel seen. Like she was trying so hard. She was so in so much pain. And I don't need to dominate. That's not that's kind of the way it is in the system, is like a need to dominate over. And I just kind of, I don't know, it was really powerful. And I really don't even know if I said anything. I think I just put my hand there. And there's so much significance in that for kids.
You showed up.
I showed up.
You showed up differently than other people, which were trying to control her behavior and control her. You showed up, in a sense, your belief in her, as well as you could see what the behavior was about, which was just pain and hurt.
Yeah. And yeah, so when you talk about kind of how do we show up different, it's a lot of that.
Yeah. The other thing I think that's really important for people to know is that we have to, sometimes trauma work is
Mm-hmm.
slow to appear, and kids work through it at different phases, and at different pacing.
Right. Some
And
kids are
so,
popcorn and some are molasses.
right. And so I was working with a kiddo who had been in like an acute trauma car accident type of experience. Really aware parents, right? That something was really bothering this kid, but they weren't showing like the classic signs that um
Usually people seek counseling for. Usually it's the
like
externalizing, but there's also internalizing and withdrawal. And
it's also, I when parents share something with me, I tend to trust it. Parent intuition is so much stronger than clinical intuition sometimes. And so just listening to this mom that just something doesn't feel right to me, like this child is not their selves, all that stuff. And I mean, it was almost a year before he brought up the accident in therapy. Okay, right. And we were at the point where we were going to terminate because, you know, it just didn't seem like maybe it was as bothering. And even the mom said that like things were getting a little bit better. Maybe this was a develop because I'm pretty clear with families. I want to be really transparent. Like sometimes it's hard to decipher developmental responses to like trauma responses, and they can like kind of cross,
right,
right? They don't always have to be as like clearly identifiable. And so we may or may not see things show up. This may just be a traditional, and I just want to be transparent. I don't want you to feel led into
right.
paying for a lot of therapy. I want you to know kind of what I'm doing. I'm pretty transparent in my approach and in my thought process with parents. And so, and then this kid showed it, right? Like he played out a car accident over and over and over and over and over and over again. He didn't seem bothered. He wasn't triggered by it, right? It's just something he needed to do to kind of, instead of verbalizing his story, he needed to play out the story over and over and over again. And he was very concrete in the way he played it out. Like it was with a car, it was with other ways, where some other kids that may not be how it shows up. It might show up in other ways than the relationship,
Right.
right? So it might show up more metaphorically
Mhm.
than like actual. Like I had one kiddo, it was probably one of the most heartbreaking experiences. It was really early in my development as a therapist, as a play therapist. But I had a kiddo who I had been seeing for a while, and she was doing some really strong work in the playroom. And in our training facility, right, we had two-way mirrors. She looked into the mirror, which if you put your face up to the mirror, you can actually see what's in there. She had never shown any interest, but for some reason that way, or that particular moment, there was a group of students observing us because as part of the training, right, observe clinician in practice so you can kind of see the different ways people practice play therapy and see how kids can show up differently and be different and all that stuff. And she looked in this mirror and she looked at one of the girls and she's like, "You have blonde hair. Will you be my mom?" Right? And like was insistent on it. We needed to leave the room. We needed to go to the into that room that those girls are in, and I want to see this one girl, right? And like she literally like from my memory, false or true, right? Like was holding on to this person, begging her to be her mother, right? Like heart-wrenching, just the pain and the strong desire to want to be connected. On the back end of that is me internally, like, this is a random stranger. Like, what are you, like my
Human
kind of
reaction.
red flags were going off, but also here I've been with this kid forever, like over a year, and she didn't want to be, I wasn't good enough to be her mom. Do you know what I mean? Like, so my own
Right.
internal crap kind of came up in that moment that I'm trying not to respond to, right?
And then you're like sad for the child that they're having this much pain. And then you're worried like their safety outside in the world,
Yeah.
if they're attaching to people that they
And
don't
then also my
know.
own, like baggage that I bring in about wanting to be a mother, not being a mother, like all that stuff just kind of showed up in this one session. And I mean, it was a great supervision and processing and lots of tears and other stuff, but like can be really, I mean, it really caught me off guard. I think, and and then I felt bad for this student, and then I'm trying to carry weight for this student, like who like had no idea what was going on, but is going to be a therapist, so is incredibly empathic and like, but the weight of like this kiddo wanting her to be her mom or, like what, and I was just like, oh,
That is,
too much to handle.
well, and I think that that's so important. And I think, we touched on this too with self care, but like you allowed yourself the opportunity to have those feelings and then you had a safe space to process them and you could cry and you could acknowledge. And I think when we don't acknowledge that or we view it as like somehow we're like doing something wrong or counter transference and this isn't something we talk about or that we can't be emotionally impacted, like we're human. And that was a really intense experience.
Yeah, I have several.
I know. I feel like we
Like,
could talk about it.
I know. I have another one where a kid was playing out her experience in school and like was screaming and yelling, and I could not move or breathe or do anything appropriately, right? Like she was playing teacher, I was playing the student. So it was like a role play scenario. So triggering for me. Like I just remember and like almost being frozen and paralyzed in the room where like I could not even function. And I remember leaving and going to Dr. Ray's office and just cried.
Hmm.
And she's like, what is going on? I was like, I
I
can't,
don't know.
like it all just, like all of those feelings, all of the stuff came up. And then really what I left with, I think my heart was so sad that that's how she sees her relationship with her teacher at school. That's how like her experience, right? Right or wrong. And we just happened to service that school that she went to. We didn't see her in school setting. We saw her in our clinic setting. And I walked by the room and the teacher was screaming and yelling. And like my heart just ached. I was like, this is what she was trying to show me, right? Like how unpredictable and how scary being in her classroom day to day was. So when I wasn't triggered and I could like see it holistically, right? Like how much more empathy I could have for her, how
Hmm.
much more like understanding I could relay in my reflections without like being prescriptive or predictive of when she brought things up related to school in particular in relationship to her teacher. And her teacher is a lovely person, just had a difficult classroom, right? And like classroom management wasn't going well. And so she was approaching it and, you know, she was losing it, right? She was getting triggered. She
Hmm.
didn't know how else to handle it. So she was just
When I
yelling and
think,
but yeah.
so often we talk about like the magic of child-centered and how, and you did, like, you felt it and it was beautiful and it was wonderful. And it's really hard. It's
Hmm.
really hard to hold those spaces. And I think like really having those conversations and explorations for self, because I think sometimes when it gets really hard, or whether it's like taking a long time, like you were first saying, or you're seeing these like really emotional responses, I think sometimes it's easy to go into self-protective mode or be like, I'm going to bring in an activity to make this go, because then you are in a semblance of control. When you're a child center and play therapist, there are certain aspects that you can control, but it's hard to control a relationship. And so really kind of having those like significant and real and honest conversations with yourself. Like, am I doing this because I think Dr. Landreth told me I should, and child centered is what I'm supposed to do, but it doesn't really fit with me? Or am I choosing to do this theoretical orientation because sitting with it is too scary? Like, not to say that that's why anyone's making theoretical decisions, but I think it's important to really sit with it. Um,
Yeah.
and
I
prepare and have honest reflections. Because there are times when I'm like, this is too much. I want to do something else.
Oh
And
yeah,
like, this is
it
hard.
was easier if I did this,
Right.
right? But I also think this is why consultation, having people pass those associate license like relationships, but you do find people that you can kind of reflect with, bounce ideas off of, process with, right? I wish our structure here in the US was more like some of the European countries where it's actually a lifetime of consultation. It's not just a temporary period of consultation, but like as you renew your license, you have to actually show that you've remained in consultation and supervision. And I think there's something to say about that as we are containers for our clients and we can only handle so much. If we
Right.
don't do that, we just start to do things like numb out
Mm-hmm.
or kind of get frozen and not like really see the importance of experiences, which make us less effective.
But I think that's part of why we wanted to do this podcast, is because we became, like, and I don't want anyone out because I'm in consultation with a lot of people. And so I don't want to minimize that relationship. But like you and I, like, we've really kind of worked together. I think I learn and grow every time I'm with you. And so that's part of why we wanted to do this, is it's our consultation, and we're working through why behind what we do and solidifying it for ourselves and learning from each other and hoping that our listeners also can do that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm so grateful for every moment I get to spend with you. And as we've said, this feels like just talking to a friend on that's getting recorded.
Care about.
Yeah. But I also think, it helps us be more supportive clinicians for not only ourselves, but our supervisees, right? Like our students.
Yeah,
I can't know everything, right? And so I'm not going to pretend to. And so having people to lean on is really important.
I
Uh,
know.
but it
Sometimes I
also,
wish, oh, sorry. Sometimes I
yeah,
wish as a faculty, I didn't immediate, like, I think both as a person and like as a child center play therapist, I'm quite quick to be like, oh, I made a mistake.
yeah,
And I sometimes feel like that's not always, sometimes I need to be like, no, too bad. But that doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel genuine. And I think that's
relational, right? So I think that's the
unhealthy.
hard part. It doesn't fit with how I think we view relationships and what relationships are supposed to look like or
Yeah.
be like.
Yeah.
Um,
This was really helpful. I'm glad that we got to talk about it.
Mhm.
And this is a passion of ours. I think that's like we've really kind of done a lot of research on it. And shameless plug, I am on NPR talking about child-centered play therapy as a means for peace, which I think was kind of it. I didn't anticipate it. And the feedback I got from Lee last night when we listened, that I didn't just act like I knew the answers, because I really had to think about them. And I'm sure I got things wrong, but it's really kind of how to, like, in a world full of trauma, how are we promoting peace and what this can be, for that. But
which
so
I think right now in our current state of being, right? Like I think we're all experiencing,
a lot of fear.
well, just a lot of sudden changes, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of ambiguity, a lot of unpredictability, right? And so like how do we show up for each other? I think it's a
Right.
really could be a more poignant time for them to release it. We've known about it for a while. Maggie and I, she did this interview a while ago, but I'm excited it's out there. We
Yeah.
will try to plug it here on
The website.
the website, but also like on our Facebook.
Yeah.
We'll put a little note on the bottom in case anyone wants to go and listen to her interview.
Yeah.
Maggie's a big deal, y'all. She is. She's a like a game changer. People don't know that about her. She would not say that about herself, but she really is. Like, she is fearless and she does not mind breaking barriers. And I just so admire that of her. So thanks for leading the charge and thanks for, always connecting with the right people to be in the right spot to do these amazing things. So I learn from you and be in awe of you. So
That's so nice. Thank you. I appreciate that. And so y'all can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, the play therapy space. We are setting our website this week, and we hope to
that's
be
coming up.
lots of things coming up. We're starting the business. It's happening. So hopefully let us know, email us if you have questions, if you have things that you want us to talk about. Check us out on social media. I think we probably need to eventually do TikTok. I've just learned how to make a reel. I know, but like TikTok, they like it. I'll cut that
I
part out.
can't forget anything. I'm like, no, TikTok.
I still call it the Facebook machine. So I clearly am like not cool anymore. But
We
thank you
stopped
as always.
a long time ago, Maggie.
Yeah. And when I was in college, when it was, you had to be invited to be a part of Facebook, that's when it came out. But yeah, so Peace Talks Radio on NPR, and check us out on socials, and we'll keep the episodes coming because it's just a joy to be able to talk with you.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye, Christy.